You think you know someone until they vanish. Not just disappear, I mean vanish without a sound, without a goodbye, without a trace. Just a note, left on a kitchen table. Feed the fish. I'll be gone for a couple of days. No destination, no phone call, no reason. What if that note wasn't a message? What if it was a warning, a breadcrumb in a trail, left behind by someone who knew she wouldn't get the chance to explain? This is the story of Fran Gladden Smith, a mother, a sister, a woman who vanished without a trace, and the sister who refused to let her become a statistic. A story about what happens when love turns into silence, and silence turns into something darker. Secrets buried, clues ignored, and a wooden box hiding a truth no one was supposed to find. Because this isn't just a missing person case. It's a pattern, one that started long before anyone noticed, and ended with a knock on the morgue's door. This is the Criminal Dossier, and today, you'll hear the story of a woman who vanished, and the man who made sure she wouldn't be the last. Before we go deeper, if you believe real stories deserve to be told, if you believe every person deserves justice, hit subscribe. Because here at the Criminal Dossier, we don't just follow headlines, we follow trails. Now, let's begin. September 28, 1991, Indianapolis, Indiana. Sherry Gladden Davis picked up the phone, like she did every week. She was calling her sister Fran. There wasn't a reason. There didn't need to be one. They were close, always had been. Weekly calls, sometimes twice. But this time, no answer. She tried again later. Still nothing. Then came Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and the phone just kept ringing. No voicemail, no callback, nothing. By then, Sherry knew something wasn't right. She picked up the phone again, this time to Fran's daughter, Dee Dee. "Have you heard from your mom?" "No, I was going to ask you the same thing." They both paused. Something heavy fell into the silence. That gut feeling? It was loud now. Sherry made another call. This time to Fran's husband, John Smith, an engineer, calm, methodical, quiet. "Where's my sister?" she asked. John's voice didn't waver. "I thought she was with you." Then he mentioned a note. He said he'd come home from work and found it sitting there on the table. "Feed the fish. I'll be gone for a couple of days." That was it, nothing more. A single line, no explanation, no destination, no goodbye, just gone. Here's the thing. Fran wasn't the kind of woman to leave suddenly. She didn't vanish, she didn't go quiet, and she didn't even like those fish. They were John's, his hobby, his thing. Sherry knew something was wrong, but when she called the West Windsor police to report Fran missing, they brushed her off. Detective Mike Dansbury answered the call. "She's a little old for a milk carton," he said with a laugh. That line, it hit like a slap. Dismissive, cold, wrong. And Sherry? She hung up the phone with something burning in her chest. Because now, it wasn't just concern. It was war. Fran Gladden, 48 years old, mother of 3, Todd, Rod, and Dee Dee. She'd lived a full life, one filled with love, but not always peace. She'd been married 3 times before. Each one started with hope and ended in heartbreak. "She just wasn't built for marriage," Sherry once said softly. But that never stopped her from trying. Fran wasn't fragile. She was strong-willed, vibrant, a seamstress with sharp eyes and steady hands. And when she met John Smith, everything seemed different. It was 1990, a barbecue in Niceville, Florida. The kind of place where the wind smells like salt and citrus. That's where she met him. John. Quiet. Polite. The kind of man who seemed to listen when no one else did. He was gentle. More affectionate than the others had been. And for once, Fran didn't feel like she had to carry everything alone. 2 months later, they were married. No fanfare, no hesitation. Fran moved into John's place in Niceville. She redecorated everything. The curtains, the walls, the furniture. Her hands stitched beauty into every corner. She laughed again. She smiled more. And for a little while, she seemed happy. Then came John's new job. Engineering work in Princeton, New Jersey. It was perfect, he said, close to his beach house in Connecticut. A new life. They packed up, moved into a quiet condominium in West Windsor Township. A fresh start, at least on the surface. Because just weeks after they moved in, Fran was gone. No packed bags, no calls to her kids, no shopping receipts, not even a trace of luggage missing. Just that note. Feed the fish. And while the police saw no red flags, Sherry did. Because something about this didn't feel like a disappearance. It felt like a message. She told John to post flyers. Dee Dee even FedExed printed ones to him from Texas, and he said he would. Said he was doing everything he could. But the phone never rang. The leads never came. No neighbors saw a thing. 3 months passed. Then came their mother's funeral. John showed up. And as he turned to leave, he handed Dee Dee something strange. Fran's sewing machine. Fran would have wanted you to have this, he said. Not wants. Would have wanted. Past tense. And that was it. Sherry didn't need confirmation. She didn't need proof. Because she knew. Fran wasn't coming back. And John Smith knew exactly why. 4 months had passed. And Fran was still missing. No calls. No sightings. No answers. But what bothered Sherry more was John's silence. He wasn't grieving. Wasn't searching. Wasn't even pretending to care. He'd stopped using Fran's name in the present tense, as if she were already gone. And the worst part? He didn't ask about the case. Not once. But Sherry couldn't let it go. Not with what she remembered. A moment, etched into her mind. Years ago, in her kitchen, John had said something, just a little off. Fran snapped at him, harsh, loud, defensive. And Sherry, caught off guard, had tried to lighten the mood. Enough, Fran, she'd said. Give the guy a break. And that's when Fran turned, her voice like stone. Don't you ever take his side against me again. At the time, it felt strange. Now, it felt like a warning. So Sherry made a decision. She wasn't going to wait on detectives. She wasn't going to trust the system. She called John. Dee Dee and I want to come stay for a few days, she said. We'd like to help. There was a pause. Then John said, Sure, you're welcome anytime. He didn't hesitate, didn't question it, didn't seem worried at all. That told Sherry everything she needed to know. And so, 2 women boarded a plane, not as grieving family, but as investigators, in disguise. They weren't visiting. They were looking for whatever John thought he'd hidden, because Sherry had a new mission now, to find the truth, no matter where it was hiding. The front door opened with a quiet click. John stood there, calm as ever. No tension, no nerves. He greeted Sherry and Dee Dee with a smile, already dressed for work. In his hands, keys. Here's the condo, he said. Here's the car. Make yourselves at home. Then, he walked out. No hesitation, no last-minute instructions, no concern. The moment he left, Sherry closed the door. She didn't move, just stood in the entryway, breathing, because this wasn't a visit anymore. This was a search, and every second counted. They started upstairs, room by room, drawer by drawer. They weren't just looking for clues. They were looking for Fran, but Fran's clothes were still there. All of them. Her jewelry, untouched, still in its box, still in the drawer. Her makeup, her shoes, even her hairbrush. A woman planning to leave? She doesn't walk out the door without her life in her hands. Fran hadn't packed. Fran hadn't planned. Fran had disappeared. And then, something else. In the hallway closet. 2 packages. Still sealed. Sherry opened one slowly, her heart already sinking. Inside, stacks of missing person flyers, the ones Dee Dee had sent to John. Hundreds of them. None were posted, none distributed. They hadn't even been opened. That was it. Whatever sliver of hope they had left died in that hallway. As the sun went down, fear rose. Sherry and Dee Dee decided to sleep in the living room. Dee Dee curled on the love seat, Sherry on the couch. Neither really slept. Because this home didn't feel empty. It felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by a truth they were getting dangerously close to. And the night wasn't over yet. The lights were out. The condo was silent. But sleep never came. Sherry lay on the couch, eyes half closed, ears wide open. Dee Dee across the room curled on a love seat, restless, uneasy. Something about that house didn't let you rest. Then, just after midnight, a sound, soft, barely a creak. The bedroom door opened. Sherry's heart stopped. She didn't move, didn't breathe. She watched as John stepped out of the shadows. No shirt, no shoes, just silence and stillness. He walked slowly, past Sherry, and sat down, right next to Dee Dee. Not close, too close. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, just sat there, staring. Eyes locked on her sleeping face, breathing calm, but not normal, predatory. Sherry's fists clenched beneath the blanket, her mind racing. If he touches her, I move. If he grabs her, I scream. Then, Dee Dee stirred. Eyes fluttered open. John, what are you doing? There was a pause, long enough to freeze the room. Then, casually, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and said, "This is for the mailbox. Would you mind getting the mail?" He handed it to her and walked away, like nothing happened. But something had happened. A boundary had been crossed, and whatever mask John Smith was wearing, it slipped that night. Because that wasn't just strange, that was a warning. And the fear, it didn't end when he left the room. It settled in, deep in their bones, and it never really left. Before they left town, Sherry and Dee Dee started knocking on doors. They weren't detectives, but they were relentless. Neighbors, co-workers, anyone who'd ever spoken to Fran or John. And that's when a name came up. A woman. Someone John had been married to before. Her name? Janice Hardman. Sherry froze. This was the first time anyone mentioned another wife. She called Detective Dansbury, demanded answers. Yeah, he said casually. He was married before. Divorced in the 70s, amicable apparently. But Sherry didn't buy it, not anymore. She grabbed a notepad, wrote down every Hardman listed in Ohio, and started calling, one by one by one. Dozens of wrong numbers, wrong voices, dead ends. Then, March 5th, 1992, the phone rang. "I'm Janice Hardman's brother. What's this about?" Sherry paused. Her hand trembled. Then she said it. Our sisters had one thing in common. They both married John Smith. There was silence. And then, the man's voice cracked. "My God, lady, you've got a problem." Because Janice Hardman, she disappeared too. November 1974, just 3 days after her divorce from John Smith was finalized. She was never seen again. He told police she'd packed a suitcase, gone to visit her grandmother in Florida. That was his story. And they believed it. But now, Sherry was looking at something bigger than a missing persons case. She was staring into a pattern. 2 wives, 2 disappearances, 2 families with no answers, and 1 man who never looked nervous. The evidence wasn't solid, yet, but the cracks were showing. And Sherry, she had a new name to chase, a new ghost to wake up, because this time, she wasn't just fighting for Fran, she was fighting for both of them. Janice Hardman, 5'5", brunette, quiet, smart. She was John Smith's first wife. They were married for nearly 5 years, until she filed for divorce in 1974. The paperwork went through, the marriage ended, and just 3 days later, so did Janice's life. Because after that, she vanished. No calls, no letters. No one ever saw her again. John told police she went to Florida to see her grandmother. Packed a bag, he said. Left a note, he claimed. They believed him. There was no body, no crime scene, no witnesses. Just another woman, gone. Sound familiar? Now, in 1992, nearly 2 decades later, Sherry was staring down the same silence. 2 wives, same man, same pattern. She turned everything over to Detective Dansbury. The names, the timelines, the eerie symmetry. And when the detective saw it all laid out, he finally understood. This wasn't about Fran anymore. It never was. This was about a predator, one who didn't snap in a moment of rage, but planned, waited, and disappeared people, like moving furniture. The law had no proof, no body, no blood. But now, it had a pattern. And for the first time, Sherry wasn't just a grieving sister. She was the lead on a double case. And one of those cases had gone cold 18 years ago. But cold cases, they don't stay buried forever. Not when someone keeps digging. Not when someone keeps asking questions. Like Sherry, April 9th, 1992. The police were finally moving. Search warrants, 2 of them. One for the West Windsor condo, the other for John's beach house in Connecticut. Sherry had waited months for this. A chance, a crack, a moment where justice might finally lean in her direction. But when detectives opened those doors, they found nothing. No blood, no sign of Fran, no hidden belongings, no suspicious documents, just furniture, old receipts, dust. It felt like defeat. Fran's case hit a wall. Janice's story still didn't have a crime scene. And John, he kept living, kept working, kept moving. Months passed, then years. The headlines faded. The calls slowed down. The leads dried up. The case was declared cold. And the man Sherry believed murdered 2 women, he was free. But Sherry didn't freeze. She printed new flyers, wrote new letters, pushed for press. Every morning she woke up asking, what if today's the day something breaks? Every night she went to bed wondering, will another woman die? Because if John had done it before, he could do it again. And this time, there'd be no warning. Just another note. Another disappearance. Another name. On another file. 6 years after Fran vanished, Sherry's phone rang again. This time it was the FBI. The Cold Case Division was reopening the file, and with them came a new ally. Wayne County Prosecutor Martin France. An agent was assigned. He started building a full dossier on John Smith. Every address, every job, every state he'd ever touched. That's how they found him. Oceanside, California, living with a new wife. Her name was Diane. Sherry did what she always did. She wrote a letter, told Diane the truth. 2 missing wives. Same man, same pattern. She didn't expect an answer, but then, on October 7th, 1999, the phone rang again. Diane was calling back. Her voice was calm, too calm. She said John had told her Fran died of cancer, that he had nursed her, until the end. A lie. One more mask. But then Diane said something that made Sherry sit up straight. There are 2 old suitcases. John told me never to open them. I'm scared of what's inside. That was it. The moment the case shifted, Diane shipped the suitcases to Sherry. When they arrived, Sherry didn't rush. She opened them slowly, one layer at a time. Inside, papers, old resumes, job applications. Nothing useful, nothing obvious. Until, tucked between the folders, 2 letters. One stood out, a hospital bill from Hammond, Indiana, addressed to a location no one recognized. Indiana? John had never mentioned Indiana. None of the reports had ever linked him there. He wasn't supposed to have any ties to that state. But that letter said otherwise. And that changed everything. Because if John had been to Indiana, then maybe, so had his victims. Sherry called Prosecutor Martin France, told him everything. Check Indiana, she said. Every Jane Doe, every unidentified body, going back to 1991. 3 days later, the phone rang. A detective from Camden, Indiana remembered something. Road workers were clearing a ditch along a rural highway. They found a box, handmade, rough wood, nailed shut, heavy. Inside, clothes, bones, a full skeleton. But something was wrong. Both feet were missing. The legs had been sawed off, just below the knees. No ID, no name, no connection. So they buried the evidence, labeled it unidentified, and moved on. Until now. The remains were exhumed, sent to the FBI for DNA testing. And Sherry, she waited. For 6 weeks, she waited, wondering what she was about to learn, hoping, terrified, that she was right. Then the call came. I got your girl, the prosecutor said. But it wasn't Fran. The DNA didn't match her sister. It matched someone else, Janice Hardman, John Smith's first wife, missing since 1974, now found, nearly 30 years later, stuffed into a box, dumped in a ditch, feet missing. She'd been there all along, forgotten by the world, erased by the man she trusted, until now, it wasn't Fran. The bones in the box, they belonged to Janice Hardman, gone since 1974, now found in 2000. A nearly 3-decade mystery, uncovered by accident. And with that one test, the case changed. Sherry dropped the phone. She didn't have the closure she wanted, but she had something even more powerful. Proof. On October 3rd, 2000, John Smith was arrested at his home in Oceanside, California. He didn't run, didn't fight, didn't speak. He was quietly extradited back to Ohio, charged with second-degree murder. July 2001, the trial began. Sherry sat in the courtroom, the weight of 10 years on her shoulders. And across the aisle, John Smith, polished, calm, still wearing the mask. But this time, it wasn't enough. Because he wasn't on trial for who he appeared to be. He was on trial for the woman he tried to erase, for the box he built, the one he thought would never be found, for Janice. And behind every fact, every photo, every piece of evidence, was a truth that couldn't be buried anymore. Justice had finally caught up, and John, he was out of places to hide. John Smith sat still in court, suit pressed, hands folded, expression unreadable. But the evidence, it spoke loudly. The prosecution laid it out, not like a crime of passion, but a project, a plan. They said Janice wanted to leave, just like Fran, just like anyone who ever saw behind his mask. And John couldn't allow that. He didn't shoot her, didn't stab her. They said he smothered her, quiet, clean, controlled. Then he built the box, not a casket, a crate, not out of grief, but strategy. And when the body didn't fit, he made it fit. He sawed off her legs, below the knee. Not to hide her, not to destroy evidence, but to send a message. You won't walk away this time. Then, he drove, across state lines, to a rural ditch in Indiana, a place no one connected him to, a place he thought she'd never be found. For 27 years, he was right, until the wrong suitcase was opened, until the wrong woman got suspicious, until the ghost in the box got a name. Sherry listened, quietly, tears held back. Because she didn't just hear Janice's story, she heard Fran's, and she knew that box was built for both of them. It wasn't about love. It was never about love. According to the prosecutor, John Smith didn't see marriage as a partnership. He saw it as a contract, till death do us part. And he planned to fulfill his end, no matter what. That's what the court heard. A man obsessed with control, with silence, with finality. Janice Hardman wanted out, so she vanished. Fran Gladden wanted out, and disappeared. But now, John Smith was no longer a mystery, no longer just a name on 2 missing persons reports. He was a pattern, a predator, a husband who turned love into control and control into silence. The trial was brutal, the evidence chilling, and though they couldn't convict him for Fran, Janice spoke loud enough for both of them. The photos, the forensic reports, the witnesses who remembered odd things, like how he changed his story. The jury deliberated, and on August 14, 2001, the verdict came in. Guilty. John Smith was sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder of Janice Hardman. It wasn't enough. Not to cover what he did, not to bring back the years, not to bring back the dead. But it was a start. Sherry sat quietly as the judge read the sentence, hands folded, eyes forward. Her sister Fran was still missing. Her body still hadn't been found. But for the first time in nearly a decade, she had the truth, she had a conviction, and she had peace. John Smith was led out of the courtroom, still composed, still silent, still dangerous, but now, behind bars. The courtroom emptied, the reporters moved on, and Sherry walked out with one thing no one could take from her. She had stopped him. She had made sure he wouldn't do it again. Years passed, seasons changed, but the ache didn't. Fran Gladden Smith was still missing. No grave, no headstone, no closure. Sherry never stopped searching. She kept in touch with investigators, kept reaching out to Fran's children, kept pushing the media, even when the world forgot. Because Sherry hadn't, she couldn't. Then, in 2004, a new detective picked up the case. Fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and one quiet question that changed everything. Has anyone searched the beach house? John's beach house, the one in Connecticut. It had been part of the early search, but never fully cleared. Too much red tape, too little evidence, too many distractions. But now, they had a warrant, and a reason to go back. Inside the garage, stacked in a corner, was a long, narrow wooden box, sealed, heavy, covered in dust. At first glance, it looked like storage, old supplies, tools, junk. But inside, something else. Clothes, a few personal items, a woman's handbag, and beneath it all, a bundle of hair, still attached to a scalp. The medical examiner confirmed it. It was Fran. DNA from her hairbrush, still at the condo, matched the remains. After nearly 13 years, Fran Gladden Smith had been found, in a box, in a garage, in the same beach house John Smith once called his safe place. He'd killed her, sealed her up, and left her there, while the world kept spinning. The news broke fast, and though John Smith was already in prison, already serving time for Janice, prosecutors reopened Fran's case. But there would be no second trial, no new conviction, no final face-off in court. John died in prison in 2006, still silent, still guilty. But Sherry didn't need his words. She had the truth, and finally, she had her sister back. Fran Gladden Smith is no longer just a missing person. She's not just a case number, not just a photo on a flyer. She is a name, a life, and a story that refused to stay buried. Her sister never let her fade, never stopped pushing, never stopped digging. Because Sherry Gladden Davis believed what too many people ignored. Silence is not peace. Distance is not disappearance. And when someone vanishes, you ask questions until they don't. John Smith thought he could control the story, thought he could end it with a box, a lie, and a smile. But Sherry wouldn't let that happen. She didn't just mourn her sister. She investigated, she hunted, and in the end, she exposed the truth. Fran's remains were laid to rest in 2005. Family gathered, friends spoke, a life remembered, no longer missing, no longer silent. And Janice Hardman, found after 3 decades in the dark, was finally buried too. This is what justice looks like. Not always swift, not always loud, but earned, relentlessly, by people who refuse to forget. This is the story of Fran Gladden Smith, and the story of the sister who refused to let her become a headline. But it's also something more. Because for every Fran, there's a Janice. For every missing woman, there's a file, a lead, a trail, waiting. Here at the Criminal Dossier, we don't just follow the crime. We follow the silence, the patterns, the people left behind. We speak the names that were almost lost. So if this story moved you, subscribe, share, speak. Because monsters don't always come with claws. Sometimes they come with vows.